A very good evening, guys. I'm very glad we are back after a break of about 2 months. With me, live on 111 today, I have Benjamin Njeru, an upcoming sports lawyer, a very young guy who's very passionate about football. Welcome to the show. This is 111. How have you been?
Thank you. I've been well. Yes, I've been well. Happy New Year.
How was your December holiday? What are you currently working on even before you introduce yourself?
Even before I introduce myself, I've been okay. My December was relaxed, but now it's a new year. It's time to do big things.
Yeah.
And those big things are, some of them are what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Okay, so briefly, who is Benjamin Njeru and what do you do, especially in regards to sports?
So, Njeru is an advocate of the High Court, 1 year post-admission. I am a managing partner at M&W and Advocates LLP. It's a law firm based in Westlands. I am also a director at M&W Consultants Limited. And we are three. Both the two other partners could not make it, but I'm here representing them.
I'm very glad that you are here.
Yeah.
So we delve directly into it.
Sure.
What does M&W do, especially in regards to sports? When did you start the law firm? Who are your partners, and why did you decide to do sports consultancy?
So we actually started the sports consultancy 2 years ago and registered the law firm last year because that's when all of us were admitted. And what we do in regard to sports is fairly new, and it's based on a project we are working on, targeting the players and touching key points in their careers which we feel will provide value addition to them.
So what are some of these projects?
The project, it's one project, and it's focusing on the players. It basically delves into the 4 things we figure are the most important and critical parts of a player's life. As you know, a player's career is so short. It's around 10 to 15 years if you're being honest in Kenya. So one of the things that we discuss is the status and transfer of such players, which discusses contracts, their stakeholders, how they handle their transfers, how they handle their status as players, and how they handle the status of other people around them, like intermediaries, lawyers, and everyone else. The second part is anti-doping. These are general rules to train them to know what is prohibited substance, what they can use, what is good for them and their bodies. At some point, we'll have to outsource some functions to other qualified personnel in terms of nutritionists and everyone else. But in terms of anti-doping laws, lawyers, that's the lawyer's concern. The third thing is the contractual disputes. So one of the major highlights that is really problematic in a player's career is contractual issues. Say a player's been injured, the club has refused to pay, that's a contractual issue. Say a player hasn't been paid, that's a contractual issue. And that's what we do. We advise them, we represent them even at the SDT as a court arbitration for sports in terms of appeals and everything. And the final one is the financial management. This might come as a surprise to most people because lawyers are basically known for the law, not finances. But at M&W we have in-house consultants who are financial consultants, and some of the functions overlap, like tax planning. A lawyer has a lot to do with tax planning, so the consultant comes in for things like investment analysis, retirement planning, financial statements, risk management, and all other stuff. So that's the 4 key talking points, the 4 key training areas which we wish to achieve and just set our footprint in the sports
we'll get to the bottom of that, but even before we do that, why sports and why specifically football? What's your background? You have chosen to do anything. You have chosen to do anything outside sports. Why sports? And generally, actually, sports in Kenya does not have money, so to say. Why sports?
Okay, so the first thing, I'll first tackle your last statement that sports in Kenya doesn't have money, because sports is a multi-billion industry. It has a lot of money. It's just easily mismanaged. And when you're looking at mismanagement in football, that's a story obviously for another time, but it's really rife, and that's what usually foretells the naysayers who find that sports is not a lucrative industry. But regarding my background and that of my partners, personally, mini boy wa Githurai. I've grown up with footballers, I've played football. So most of my friends are footballers. And in our interactions, I find that I am entangled in most of their debates, most of their discussions. Some of them contractual disputes, some of them wajalipwa, some of them have handled their contracts poorly, some of them have handled their finances poorly. So this is an area I'm really passionate about, because I really want to see the people that come up, especially in sports, they don't make the same mistakes, especially because the people who right now are in the industry, they didn't have lawyers, they didn't have intermediaries, they didn't have people to show them the way in terms of the law, in terms of finances, in terms of everything that's there. So with us being in the legal space, we have to make a difference in other people's lives.
Okay, you are barely 1 year old into the sports consultancy business.
Yes.
How has it been so far? Who are some of the players or organizations you are working with, and what would you say has been the biggest challenge so far?
I have a habit of answering from the last thing you say.
It's okay.
So I'd say that okay, let me start by saying that our project basically targets players and only players. So we are targeting some of the players that, as I've said before, we grew up with, players we've been in the same environment with. And currently on our pilot project, we have players like Martin Werunga, plays for Mathare United. We have Kevin Odongo, plays for Posta Rangers. And basically the project is just to train them. The project is to package them well, because our goal is to get the player who's the ultimate package. A player with a nice portfolio, a player with a nice profile, scouts can look at, intermediaries can look at, clubs can look at, a player with proper financial statements, a player with proper investment analysis, a player who's the whole package. So I'd say we are 1 year in the consultancy, and to answer again your last question now, the biggest challenge we've had has been that we are only 1 year in. Yes. So people would look at us like, hey, our vijana, do they really know what they're saying, you know? But I think that when you put, when the rubber meets the road and there's an actual problem that has to be solved, and then you solve it, then you gain the trust of this person, you gain the trust of this institution. So I'd say it's a step at a time, it's a brief at a time, it's one thing we do at a time, and that thing propels us to the next step. Some of the organizations that we've talked to and worked with and basically liaised with is FKF, because the main issue is the players' welfare. Yeah. And you find that clubs are at loggerheads with players most times, because their interest and the interest of the players may not be necessarily the same. You see, clubs want to maximize their profits. Clubs want to maximize their wealth. Players want to make a good living. Players want to showcase their talent. And so sometimes they overlap. So you find that working with clubs at this point wouldn't be to the best interest of our players.
Okay, speaking of investments, you mentioned you're working with Martin Werunga at Mathare United. You're working with Kevin Odongo at Posta Rangers.
Yeah.
You know, having been in industry for the past decade, I know for a fact that those two clubs don't pay well per se. So, what's the end game for you guys? How do you get your investment back, and what does the future hold for you guys as sports consultants?
That's a really good question. You find that when you chase money at the first instance, you'll always be looking for that money. But when you find a problem in society and fix it, the money will follow you.
I love that.
Yeah, and I find that's a general rule of thumb everywhere. So the end game is not just to train players and have them go their way. The end game is to create a niche where we are renowned for how we deal with players, and that's business. As I said, sports is a multi-billion shilling industry. So if M&W Consultants gets the reputation of building players, of representing players, in these tribunals where you hear there is only one or two lawyers who handle everything, that's about to change. And we're not saying that only M&W will be in this space. This is a wake-up call to everyone in the industry, every intermediary, every lawyer. Get into the space. M&W are doing it only 1 year into practice. Why not you guys? Yeah.
Speaking of that, you say there are only a few lawyers who represent these players when we have disputes.
Yeah.
Who has inspired you to take this route of, trying to deal with players, representing them? Who are some of the lawyers that you look up to in your life?
Regarding the lawyers or the professionals who've inspired us, to be honest, there's specific lawyers who are in the industry, like Majani represents everyone in the sports fraternity. Say Ken Ochieng with Zoo represents his club and is well renowned, but I wouldn't per se, and speaking on behalf of my partners as well, I wouldn't say that they are our main influencers to get into the sport. I'd say what has influenced us is what we've seen on the ground, is what we've seen when we've gone to the stadiums to watch them, is what we've seen when we've interacted with those players. That's been our inspiration. But in terms of other lawyers out there, we have senior lawyers who we look up to. We have senior lawyers we consult. We have young lawyers also that we consult. We have there's a lawyer called Misare who runs his own law firm called Oma Law. He's also a lawyer we look up to. There's our teacher at law school, Anna Konuche. She's a very brilliant lawyer that we also look up to. There's a lot of other lawyers that we look up to in the industry. So there's a lot of lawyers who we run into problems, we give them a call, we ask them, we've run into this hurdle, how do we go about it? And they pick our call and they help us, and that's how we grow.
Well, speaking of that as well, would you say there's a gap in terms of player representation and sports education and all that pertains to it?
I'd say with player representation, there surely is, because you can't pinpoint 10 renowned sports lawyers in Kenya, you can't. So there's obviously a gap. Wachezaji hawana representation. Then, one, they don't know where to look. Two, they most of the times players wako na shida, they have a long-term injury. Yeah. For example, the late lawyer Mercy had represented one goalkeeper who was injured, and for a long time he didn't have representation at that point. And I think that's a huge gap. And even in terms of intermediaries, agents, there's also a really huge gap that lawyers can actually really get into. And the other question you asked, whether there's a gap in sports education, yeah. Even among lawyers, I can assure you that a lot of lawyers don't have a grasp of the tenets of what really involves the legal sphere in terms of sports law. It's some of the issues are emerging, especially in Kenya, because we haven't had a long-time appreciation of the sport. We've seen football as a game. We haven't seen it as a business.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be discussing about, especially the disputes. We've seen players taking their clubs to the SDT, yeah. To the DRC at FIFA. We'll discuss more into that. And are these players really looking at these contracts when they sign them? Remember, our show is sponsored by MozartBet. You can bet on mozartbet.co.ke. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back shortly. Well,
it's on a break.
We're now back.
We're back.
So, Njeru, I want you to go directly into player contracts. Why do we have so many disputes among players? Contractual issues with clubs. What really is going on, and do you think it's miseducation among the players?
Okay, the first thing about contracts is that a contract is a legal document per se, and it isn't as easy to understand a contract as it looks. It isn't just reading and understanding a contract. So the first thing I see people fail at is actually negotiations in terms of a contract, because wachezaji wengi, as you know, they just sign contracts that have been brought to them. They don't check it, they don't negotiate the terms, because, for example,
jinsi ya kucheza Mozart Lucky Super
the names of the parties, the consideration, which is the payment to the player, the terms. So, for example, even in terms of how the remuneration of the player, a player is entitled to ask the reason why they are paying him or her 50,000 while they pay another one 70,000. That's something that is a negotiable principle in terms of contract law. It's something that a player can bring up. In terms of dispute resolution, most of these contracts don't even have arbitration clauses, so, or any other dispute resolution method. So you easily find that incorporating such a thing in the contract, like an arbitration clause, it really helps the player. In case there is a dispute, go straight to arbitration. The arbiter has been set, the award is given, the player goes. But when you find these contracts, you see clubs draft the contracts.
Okay.
And when a club is drafting the contract, they draft what is really in their best interests. It's not favoring the player. That's why most of these contracts zinaenda kwa SDT. Most of these contracts can actually be resolved in terms of a dispute. Zikuwe dissolved so easily in terms of an alternative dispute resolution mechanism. In terms of the SDT can have a really easy time when such terms are really strict in terms of the drafting, because I feel most contracts you fail hapo kwa the drafting. Sababu club inataka tu yunde kitu inawasaidia.
Okay, my producer tells me we are ready for a break, so we'll take a short break. Like I said, remember, One-on-One is sponsored by the leading gaming company in Kenya, that is MozartBet. You can get MozartBet at mozartbet.co.ke. We'll be back shortly.
A player mostly gets to get his big break at around 21, 22. Even in the true age, ama iwe ni yenye iko kwa birth certificate, doesn't matter. Yeah. The player has 10 to 15 years active at the top level. After that, you're done. So this 10, 15 years, we want to get the best out of them. We don't, and that's the difference in accounting between profit maximization and wealth maximization. We want to maximize their ability to create wealth within the 10-15 years. So what do I mean by a player's brand? By a player's brand, I mean, one, who does this player surround himself with? Most players in Kenya hawana mawakili. So by God's graces, the players under us will be represented by M&W consultants. In the long run, we'd want for every player to have a lawyer to negotiate their contracts, to handle their disputes, to handle their transfers, to handle their immigration issues, to handle their tax issues, to handle everything. We will want every player to have an intermediary, a representative, someone who does things on their behalf. We don't want a player to be everything in their career. We don't want the player to be the one looking for the club. We don't want to be the player to be the one urging for medical appeal in cases of injury. We want to resolve these things so that the brand of a player doesn't suffer. We want the player to be a really marketable, I wouldn't call the player commodity, but a really marketable person in society.
Well, that sounds like a very good project, but sijui kama boli ya Kenya though haiko ready for that sort of professionalism. You know, it works in Europe, it works in other countries. For instance, in South Africa, it could work. Mimi nimejaribu kudili players, ninajua ni kazi ngumu sana. Ukijaribu kumwambia unamrepresent na kufanya hizo vitu zote unaonekana unataka kumkulia. But again, like I said, at the moment, the Kenyan football landscape does not have a lot of money, especially kwa wachezaji. Kwa juu wanaweza kuwa kuna pesa, maybe I don't want to get into that, but what I'm saying is guys at the top have the finances, but does it trickle down to the players? And like you mentioned, you are dealing directly with the players. You might not want to make money right now, but I'll have to ask this again. What's the end game? Because I know you're just starting, you could be very excited, you want to do this and that. But maybe after 2 or 3 years, you can make a do hapo, partners wako make a do, and there's nothing coming out of it. Are you prepared for this? Or do you think the Kenyan football landscape is ready for such a huge project?
So, like I said, I really disagree that football ya Kenya haina pesa. I really disagree. Ball ya Kenya iko na pesa. Pesa iko. It is just mismanaged at every level, and most painfully at the club level, because I was reading this book that discusses baseball in America, and it really emphasized on the differences, that the issues that we see in Kenya at this point, because it compared a well-managed outfit and an outfit with very deep pockets. And every time a well-managed outfit beat that outfit with deep pockets. For example, you know, the teams Kenya zimekuja hapa zimemwaga pesa hazijabeba league. Zingine, it's true. Another one imekuwa too managed, haina pesa mingi and they're winning games, you see. And so if it got to a player amekuja amesign kwa club, amepata sign on, si ya pesa mingi, it's just for 1 million Kenya shillings, 1.5 million Kenya shillings. That's money that should be invested. That's money that a player can use well. That's money that a player can invest. We are lawyers, we do everything ranging from conveyancing, land transactions, we do a tax planning. Those are briefs we can get from players every time. So, like I said when we were in the middle of the show, when you solve a problem, money follows. So, mchezaji amekuja anataka kununua land. Where will he go? He'll come to M&W and Advocates LLP. Atanunua land yake hapo, tamsaidia anunue land, alafu anasonga mbele. Kama ni investment planning, tunamuitia financial advisor wetu, our in-house financial consultant, anakuja anampangia vitu. Player anakuwa na financial statements zake, player anakuwa na retirement plan yake, player anakuwa na risk management in terms of investment opportunities zenye anafuata. So at the long term, kama uko na huo player in your portfolio, you've managed this player, your pesa, as long as you've managed it well, at some point, not even at some point, as long as you're managing it well, it reaps benefits, and the benefits trickle down, not just to you as a firm, but to the player and his immediate environment.
Well, apart now from, of course, the investment opportunities in the players that are under your portfolio, in terms of education, what are you guys doing now?
In terms of education, tunawafundisha from the basic principles of a contract. What should be in a contract? Players wengi hawajui contract zao zinakaja, hawajaiziona na wanacheza tu kwa club, au bora pesa inakuja wako sawa. So we want to teach them that hii contract ikikuja isome kwanza, tafuta wakili, mwambie aangalie kama iko sawa. Most of the terms hapo zinaweza kuwa zinakaa poa but zina ku disadvantage. As a club huwezi andika contract yenye ina iko advantageous kwa mchezaji na kwako si advantageous. For every contract there's a party with higher bargaining power, kama club who is employer, kama landlord na tenant, vitu kaa hizo. So lazima ukuwe na equalize wawe at arm's length, wawe at an equal distance in terms of bargaining. So ikianza hapo, player kishajua ku manage issues, legal issues zake hapo, tunampeleka pole pole tu kwa all the laws that concern him. Kama anti-doping laws might seem small in Kenya, but ukiangalia player kienda akipiga international transfer and the medical apatikane yako na so many prohibited or banned substance in his body, transfer inakuwa shida. Unaona?
Okay. That's an interesting thing, eh? Unajua uzuri wangu mimi na watu tumezaliwa mtaani, tunaonanga hizi vitu. Unapatanga maybe mchezaji ametoka game, anashikisha veve yake, kuna wenye wanavuta ndomo. In terms of anti-doping, what is allowed and what is not allowed? Okay,
so anti-doping is a really huge concept in the world, and various jurisdictions have what they allow, what they don't allow, but internationally kuna zile vitu aziko allowed completely. So for example in Kenya, the Anti-Doping Act apo around section 31 if I'm not wrong. Yeah. It's been long since I read it, but I think I'm right. So kwa that act, the anti-doping, the agency itself ndo ina set what is prohibited and what is not prohibited. So mchezaji anafaa kuwa ako adherent na ako aware, that's also true, of what is prohibited, what is not prohibited. But internationally kuna zile vitu mchezaji, for example cocaine, hiyo ni illegal kabisa. Other performance enhancing drugs pia hizo ni illegal kabisa.
By performance enhancing drugs, what do you mean? Nikichapa Red Bull yangu niko sawa kama mchezaji?
Ukichapa Red Bull ni energy drink. Red Bull simba, maybe daktari atakwambia ni mbaya kwa health yako, but Red Bull umeona hata wachezaji wa Leicester wanapiga, Leeds wanapiga Red Bull. Yeah. So siwezi sema energy drink ni prohibited substance, siwezi sema ni performance enhancing. That's just an energy drink. Ni kama vile unaweza patia wachezaji glucose after time, vile unaweza wapatia those energy bars wakiisha nguvu hivyo.
Na miraa na mogoka, hiyo ndio shida kubwa sana ya wachezaji Kenya.
Okay.
I know you're not a doctor, but of course you.
Yeah. So
I know it's a topic you are very passionate about na umeipitia.
That's true. Unapata the biggest issue na jaba ama veve, issue yake ni societal sana, acha hata medical. Issue yake ni societal na inaonyesha sana professionalism ya player na discipline ya player packaging vile iko, in terms of scouts, in terms of clubs. Ukishikisha usiku yote na kesho uko na game, hauta perform to the level ya player mwingine ako na commitment na anashikishi, unaona? Like I said, uko na 10 to 15 years, so ni uchague kama utakula miraa ama utacheza ball. So I think it's a very contentious issue, sababu maplayer wanasema wanaangaliwa sana, sijui veve imekuwa mbaya, pombe imekuwa mbaya, but at the end of the day, see, it's your career.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So a topic that I know I'm also very passionate about, like you mentioned, kuna disputes mob sana between players and clubs.
Yeah.
So I know it starts at the, like you said, at the drafting level of the contract.
Correct.
If it's drafted correctly, then you avoid a lot of things.
Yes.
But now a player, let's call him player X, mostly mwana mchezaji amedropiwa tu, maybe alikuwa na contract ya 3 years, after 1 year amedropiwa. So anafaa kufanya nini? Now you're indicating players.
Okay. So
what's the first thing anafaa kufanya?
In every contract, kuko na termination clause. Termination clause inaonyesha vile player anafaa kuterminatiwa under that contract. So si ati player ako na contract ya 2 years, after 6 months amechujwa kuna do, ama amechujwa contract yake imeterminatiwa na ameambiwa waishia. You see, that's where a lawyer comes in, and that's what is really important for a player to know when a contract is involved. Sometimes anaweza patiwa adequate notice depending on the circumstances na alipwe. Issue si kutema mchezaji, issue ni kucompensate mchezaji adequately after ushamchuja. You see, and that's what triggers most of the disputes. Issue si kutoa mchezaji juu. Mchezaji kana anaijua atapata club. Issue ni umekana yeye 1 year, 6 months hujamlipa, umemchuja alafu. Yeah, that's the problem.
So mchezaji amechujwa, anafeel amechujwa unfairly, legally.
Yes.
What's the first step anafaa kufanya? Because I find it funny that most players are sacked from this club unfairly, but there's nothing that they do. Unapata si wote wataenda kwa lawyers, si wote wako na pesa za kwenda kwa lawyers.
Ni ukweli.
So if they want to come to MNW, hawana do. Unajua na pesa ya kukulipa, haizi ku afford.
Yes.
What's the first thing anafaa kufanya? Do you do these services pro bono, or how does it work?
So tukisema tachukua hizo mata pro bono zitatu overwhelm. You see, hatuwezi sema tachukua pro bono hizo mata. It depends on a case by case basis. You see, mchezaji inategemea unaangalia situation. Juu unaweza pata mchezaji kuna gross violations kwa hiyo contract. Mchezaji ameumia, amepata career ending injury, ajalipwa na kuna contract. You see, hapo hata ukifanya pro bono, at the end of it uta benefit sabu the case itself will market you as a firm. But mchezaji wote anafaa jua in cases of a contractual dispute, asipolipwa, the first thing that unafanya ni una exhaust all other mechanisms kwa club. I'm sure all clubs iko na internal mechanisms za kuresolve hizi dispute. Most of the time they don't work, lakini zitumie kwanza. Then after that, Sports Act Kenya ime-establish the disciplinary tribunal, SDT. Hapo mchezaji anaenda, you make your case there, and the tribunal are really I don't want to say it's on the side of the player, but it really is a champion for the downtrodden. So you have many opportunities many avenues after that. You can appeal to the courts for arbitration for sports, the CAS. You have recourse. As a player, you have recourse. Always know that uko na recourse. As long as kuna contract, that's a binding agreement.
Okay, now let me just ask you this. Mchezaji anafaa kujipeleka directly kwa SDT ama anafaa kuwa na legal representation?
So it happens that legal representation si kila mtu anaweza afford. Si kila mtu anaweza pata. So player anaweza jirepresent. It is discouraged greatly kwa mtu kujirepresent. It's very unfortunate because there's so many lawyers. But player anaweza jirepresent. Nothing stops a player from representing himself in the SDT. Now, if there's any information ama knowledge gap a player lacks, a player can always approach us. You know, si tamsikiza tamu advice. Kama tuna capacity ya kumsaidia tamwambia ukweli.
Now we're about to come to the end of the show, unfortunately. But we have to talk about now the retirement, which is something that you had mentioned that player akona at most between 10 and 15 years ya kucheza active football. But unfortunately landscape ya ball ya Kenya, wengi wanaanza wakiwa 25, anaweza sema kwa 16 ama 18, but ameanza ball late. So kama umeanza 25, nature has a way of shortening your career span. So
magoti nakata after 5 years. Magoti
nakata, unaweza cheza season 3 4, then that's it. And the truth is wachezaji wengi wajasoma, they don't have something to fall back to. Or even if you have to, once you're 35, then huwezi anza na ukue successful as such that kama ungeanza ukiwa mdogo. So between those 10 to 15 years, or for kwa situation ya Kenya, mchezaji maybe akona wengi wanaanzanga late, na wengi ni wenye wameforge age, I'm sorry to say. So probably akona 6 to 8 years za kucheza ball. Na walipi poa unless you're lucky to play abroad. Anafaa kufanya nini to maximize with whatever little anapata such that atakuwa set for retirement vizuri?
Okay. So nitaongelea two types of players then. Nitaongelea international players who've gone abroad na local players. So in terms of ukipata hiyo chance ya kwenda internationally, international football, ukichukua upate a very good deal, that's a prime scenario to really invest. And by invest I mean this. By invest I mean get your financials in order, get your affairs in order. Hiyo pesa unalipwa, invest. Kama ni huko, kama ni back home, invest. Huku Kenya kuko na so many double taxation treaties with so many countries, kina UK, kina Japan, all those countries tuko na double taxation treaties. So mchezaji mwenye ako Japan Kaolunga kama anataxiwa huko, basi itakuwa offset na tax ya hapa, atalipa tax mara mbili. Kama hajataxiwa huko, atakuja alipe tax ya hapa, alafu kama alilipa maybe intermediary huko, atachukua withholding tax ya 20%. Hiyo iko section 39 of the Income Tax Act. With remit huku, alafu less yenye ameshalipa intermediary. So vitu kama hizo ni ndogo ndogo, but zinakusaidia ku manage yourself as you play abroad. Ndo ukirudi huku Kenya ukuwe na foothold, uko already hiyo pesa ulitengeneza huko isikuwe ilisha in vain, isikuwe unarudi huku umechapa. Naona iko unarudi huku, and that's why for example it's important to have lawyers, to have proper intermediaries. Watu hata ukiwa huko, if you need to invest in Kenya, you can buy land, you can buy property, you can invest in capital markets, you can invest in shares, you can invest in anything. So that's for international players. Unfortunately, si kila mtu upata.
Actually, like 99% of Kenyan footballers will never play abroad. Only
some of the reasons ni
very lucky and very hardworking, like 1%. The likes of Olunga, the likes of Wanyama.
Okay.
Now, even before you talk about now the investment opportunities, local players who of course hawalipi a lot. But wakikuwa nasemanga hata kidogo bado unaweza fanya nayo kitu.
Yeah.
Tuliona Wanyama juzi alikuwa Busia, amebuy land, 20 acres, is building an academy, is building a school. But apart from shares and buying land, what other investment options do the lucky Kenyans that have got that opportunity to play abroad wanalipwa poa? What investment opportunities do they have?
So
in your opinion?
Investment vehicles ni mingi sana. Kuna accounts mingi sana za kuinvest. Kuna money market funds, kuko na shares unaweza invest. There is a lot of investment vehicles that is part of what our financial management entails. Hizo ni za player mwenye amecheza maybe abroad, data locally still kuna investment vehicles, but tulikuwa tunaongelea players wenye wamepata hizo moves za abroad. So I guess locally now, tumekuja locally. Can I answer?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so first of all you said that kuna our players wenye wajapata hiyo chance, wengi wao hata ni maybe luck, maybe just something didn't go their way, hawakupata hiyo move, but wako hapa Kenya. So ukiwa hapa Kenya, it's really important to, it's not much you're making, and it's really, I really dislike having to tell someone that hii pesa unapata kidogo, fanya hivi, sijui save, sijui amount flani. At some point mchezaji ziishi maisha mbaya sana, alafu wako na responsibilities and all, but as you play, also focus on building yourself, because building your portfolio, building your image, that is what sells you as a player. That is what gets you even this other gigs after football. For example, hata unaweza kuwa sports, unaweza itwa na sports journalist kwa hizo shows unaongea because of your experience and how you package yourself. Watu wengi sana wamepata opportunities na wamekuwa former players as a result of how they handled themselves when they were playing. Unaona kina Michael Koth, watu wote as players, they were very well packaged. So I think that's the most important thing that anyone who's a footballer in Kenya right now should be taking home, is that how you package yourself really matters. Kama ni education, usiweke kando hizo coaching badges unaweza pata. Anything else unaweza fanya, kama ni academy unaweza anzisha, there's a lot you can do with your talent other than play football.
Well, I love that because kuna mchezaji anaitwa Ronaldo Koth, na napenda vitu amelitata very early, but naona kuna academy anajaribu kufanya kitu, kuna organization. I only want to say he was lucky, but at least alienda shule even when he was playing, alienda paka university level. But unajua si kila mtu anaweza, especially I don't know why it is so, but si wachezaji wengi wanapenda kusoma. Unajua? So maybe Ronaldo Koth alikuwa nayo passion ya kusoma, but for wenye wapendi masomo, wenye wataki kusoma, most of them maybe alikuwa tu hata kumaliza form 4 ilikuwa kiboko ya mzazi.
Yes.
But ako KPL anacheza bola, anapata at least some form of salary. Anafaa kufanya nini na ido at least asecure future yake. Because atacheza only for 6 to 8 years. Ana pesa mingi, but anaweza investaje ama anaweza jipangaje?
So investment ni very specific na very subjective. It depends on person to person. That's why unakaa na mtu, ni kama for example mtu akuje tu akupate kwa barabara, akuulize, akwambie niko na X amount of money, nataka kufungua biashara, nifungue biashara gani? Hawezi mu-advise appropriately because you don't know him, you don't know his strengths, you don't know his weaknesses, you don't know his contacts. So the first thing first is to get information. Get information. Ongea na huyo financial advisor, ongea na huyo accountant, ongea na huyo wakili, ongea na huyo coach, ongea na huyo teammate, ongea na watu, pata contacts, develop, get information. Information na masomo ni vitu very different. Unaweza kuja soma, lakini the number of people you've interacted with and how they've shaped you and what avenues you've undertaken, umeshabadilisha maisha yako even as a footballer. Na ubaya ya pesa ya Kenya ya ball ni that in most clubs haiko guaranteed kila saa. So at all times you must be thinking ahead that football si retirement plan. Football is never a retirement plan.
That's a good exit point. In discussion yes, tunapenda ball. We want the best for our footballers, but I hope I may pick nuggets of wisdom from this conversation. Now nakupata opportunity ujimarket na market farm yenu. Wachezaji wakitaka kuwafikia wanawafikiaje? Ofisi zenyu ziko wapi? Kuna website, social media, namba ya ofisi, wanaweza wafikiaje?
So as I said, tuko na 2 outfits. Tuko na M&W and Advocates LLP. That's the law firm that deals with anything that a legal firm, a law firm does in terms of tax, in terms of conveyancing, in terms of corporate law, in terms of litigation, all that. Kuna consultancy ya hizi vitu nimekuwa nikiongelelea. Kuna IP pia ni important because players have to know their intellectual property rights, image rights, all of that, copyright, vitu zenye wanaweza register, how they can earn from that, most of the things there. So our offices ziko located Westlands, tuko Western Heights 10th floor. Our socials ni M&W and Advocates LLP na M&W Consultants Limited. Tumezieka mbili tofauti juu ni different entities. So that's how you can reach us. Our numbers are there, our emails are there, our website is there, everything is there.
Okay, Njeru, asante sana for gracing this show. Ini ya kwanza hii mwaka. We are hoping to do this every Friday. Hopefully next time tufanya at a different location. But guys, good things are coming this year and I wish you a nice evening. Tendelea kuzidi. Look out for one-on-one again on Friday. Njeru, thank you so much.
Asante.
Tazidi kuzungumza.
Thank you.